Hello there. Hope you're all well, hope you're all warm, and I hope this season you materially and spiritually got everything that you wanted, because yes, it is the now annual festive edition of At the Movies with Andrew, and we have indeed reached December of 2019. It is the most wonderful time of the year, supposedly, because Christmas is coming, and so is Brexit. Some people like to go and visit their loved ones. Some people like to go to concerts or pantomimes or their children's school plays. I like to go to the cinema and then tell you about what I've seen, because I'm weird like that. And yes, as it's Christmas, one or two promising pieces of entertainment are around, so there's definitely promise at the outset, and I'd like to get, I don't know about you, but I'd like to get this year wrapped up as soon as possible. So without any further ado, let's dig in. But first, let me get this damn thing off my head. And for December, we are indeed starting off with a festive Christmas movie that actually got released last month in November. So if nothing else, you have to admire the sheer audacity and optimism of the people who made this. Yes, it is Last Christmas, and as the title may have immediately conjured up images for you, may have conjured up George Michael perhaps, you would be correct, because this is inspired by and features songs from the late great George Michael, but it is ostensibly starring Emilia Clarke, Henry Golding, Emma Thompson, Michelle Yeoh, and ultimately directed by Paul Feig, who gave us such movies as the very first movie I ever did for this program, A Simple Favor, and the 2016 version of Ghostbusters. And no, I know what you're expecting, but I am not going to do that. Please don't run away because it's this director who did this awful movie joke again. Not with this director, at least. Premise, life is tough at the moment for Kate, for reasons that aren't immediately clear, but will eventually become apparent. She's recently been through a crisis that has left her in the mood to drink hard and party hard, well above the acceptable limit. She's comically, as an aspiring actress, she's comically going to auditions and failing them. She's burning bridges with all of her friends by getting into sitcom-worthy comical mishaps that cause them to chuck her out of their flat. So she's having to spend the festive season with her overbearing, mollycoddling, overprotective family, and so she's also stuck having to make ends meet as a shop assistant in an all-year-round Christmas shop headed up by a bossy lady who insists on being referred to as Santa. But things might be looking up for Kate when a mysterious stranger bumbles into her life on his bicycle named Tom. He's charming, he's dishy, he says he works at the local volunteer shelter for homeless people, and whenever Kate is feeling particularly down about what's happening to her at the moment, he's always there as if by magic to give her a little homily about how life is good and look at all the wonders of the world, of London, that you don't normally pay attention to. And in order to enjoy life, first Kate must learn to enjoy and love herself. Will she be able to do that? And more to the point, this handsome stranger who seems too good to be true, is he indeed too good to be true? So, as you might have gathered from that little summary, this is one of those romantic comedy kind of Christmas movies, and I have already seen some reviews unfavourably calling it a sugary, sweet and schmaltzy Hallmark movie, you know, the sort of low budget sappy offerings on television that somehow made it to the big screen. But I wouldn't go that far, but I will say my overall impression coming out of this. Have any of you out there seen Love Actually? That quirky, eccentric, comedic, witty Richard Curtis Christmas movie? If you said yes, then picture that, because this is essentially the Diet Coke version of it. No, it's not an ensemble piece, and it's very much centred on Emilia Clarke as Kate. But if you can picture that sort of quirky tone and dialogue set in the milieu of London with Christmas lights and everything, then you're on the right track with the sort of atmosphere and tone that this is perhaps going for. You've even got Emma Thompson in this movie as well as the comically overbearing and overprotective and mollycoddling mother to Kate, who's Polish, so expect Polish or Romanian, sorry, jokes. And also Emma Thompson wrote this movie, and you can probably tell from the dialogue she gives herself, as well as the slight theme that crops up every now and then of Brexit. Yeah, I know. It's not too intrusive or repetitious, but there are a couple of in-your-face moments. One when they're watching a BBC News forecast, and secondly when Kate is on a bus and a couple of thugs are shouting to some passengers, "Why don't you go back to where you came from? You're not wanted here." I mean, I'm sure your heart was in the right place, but congratulations on dating your sweet romantic Christmas comedy there. Otherwise, I should probably mention that Paul Feig is the director of this movie, but it's competent. That's all I can really say, especially when you consider that this director has done more tonally distinctive comedies in the past, and this seems very safe for him. I mean, yes, you've got transition shots of walking through Covent Garden and Soho and Leicester Square and Piccadilly Circus with all the pretty Christmas lights and buses and milieu and mise en scène you associate with the city, but did he see this as a safe little job in between projects or something? I mean, he didn't exactly embarrass himself, but he didn't really make himself stand out either. Otherwise, I enjoyed the chemistry and the jokes between Henry Golding and Emilia Clarke are sweet and quirky enough. There is a subplot with Michelle Yeoh falling in love with a customer that's only really there to go, "Oh, look, we thought this hardened lady is suddenly, cold-hearted lady is all suddenly giggly and girly towards this gentleman," and that's the joke, really. At least it doesn't outstay its welcome. And yeah, there are George Michael's songs in there, you know, Last Christmas, You Gotta Have Faith, and all the others that I can't remember and you probably can't remember right now. And one that he recorded and never published that ends up in the end credits, so that was nice of them. It's ultimate. I wouldn't call it schmaltzy, but it is a very sweet and warm-hearted and sentimental movie, and that just so your attitude towards such material may vary in enjoying this movie. But the one thing that might influence your perception of this movie, whether you go along for the ride or you shake your head in disbelief and go, "What the hell were Paul Feig and Emma Thompson thinking?" is the twist in the third act, which I will not spoil for you, but everybody who saw the trailer guessed it from 10 miles away, and they were correct. But without wanting to spell it out too much, I do want to get some of it off my chest at least. But Tom, Henry Golding's character, Mr. Mysterious Stranger. He's always wearing the same clothes, and Kate is the only character he ever talks to or interacts with. I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions from there, and they're probably correct. And yeah, it is an outrageous twist, and it takes one of George Michael's lyrics a little bit too literally, but again, your mileage may vary on whether you can go along for the ride with this, and that's probably a good way to sum up Last Christmas, is that its heart is in the right place, and your attitude towards sentimental, sweet rom-coms set during the festive season may depend on how much you really enjoy this, or just let it absorb you. Like a Christmas pudding, it's rich and probably not good for you in the long run, but you enjoy the warm feeling in your body whilst you're ingesting it. This is a movie that's destined to occupy a tiny little space on festive TV schedules for the rest of eternity. I don't know if I'd put it in the same classic echelons of something like Love Actually, but people will watch it. People may get something out of it whilst it's on, but ultimately they may forget it. Next up, we have Knives Out, a full-blown whodunit murder mystery type caper with an ensemble cast, with starring Daniel Craig, Jamie Lee Curtis, Anna de Armas, Chris Evans, Michael Shannon, Toni Collette, Don Johnson, and that's just off the top of my head. And directed by Rian Johnson, who, amongst other things, most recently directed Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Oh no, where are you going? No, please don't leave. I swear this isn't as bad as that. Please, it's that Star Wars was bad. Everybody hated what it did to Star Wars, but he's all right here, please. Oh no. A lot of you went out the door very quickly when I said The Last Jedi, didn't you? Oh God. Rian Johnson, what did you do? I'll be coming back to that. But for now, let's focus on this. Harlan Thrombey, played by Christopher Plummer, is a decorated and much lauded murder mystery writer, and his ever so loving but secretly money grubbing and backstabbing family gather at his mansion for his 85th birthday. Yes, they've all got their agendas and they're ultimately leeching off his family fortune, but Harlan Thrombey is having a good night celebrating his 85th birthday. And the very next morning he's discovered dead. The police investigate this, but very quickly deduced by the motion of the throat slice, and it appears to be self-inflicted. It appears to have been a suicide. That seems to be that. Case closed, except who's this gentleman sitting in the background observing events in an eccentric manner? Why, it's Benoit Blanc. Yep, seriously, his name's Benoit Blanc, played by Daniel Craig, and as one character notes, I read a tweet about an article about you. You're famous. You're the last of the gentleman sleuths. Yes, he's a private detective who has been hired to investigate the Thrombey family and this incident for anonymous, mysterious reasons. Anonymous and mysterious even to himself, it turns out, because he claims that he's got no idea why he's actually here. He was sent a letter with some money saying, something is going on here, don't trust this family, investigate please. So, as he says, there is a donut here, and there is a hole at the center of this donut. Now, I suspect foul play here, gentlemen. So, it's a good old whodunit murder mystery, and as it turns out, everyone had a motive for wanting good old grandfather Harlan dead. But who could it possibly be amongst this family? Or should we be looking somewhere else? Yeah, it's and that's all I can really say about the plot, because as a whodunit murder mystery, I can't really go any further into it without spoiling any details. And I don't really want to spoil any details, but I'll try and be elusive and say here that Rian Johnson, as a director, got mocked for The Last Jedi, amongst other things, because of, I believe, a quote he said that was then turned on him, which I think is very applicable here with this movie, in that he subverts expectations. What we have here is we have the Agatha Christie murder mystery template here, a very postmodern take on this narrative structure. And what you normally get with this is a story that plays its cards very close to its chest. Maybe one or two little details about character motivations, but it's usually not until you gather everybody in the room at the end, which this movie sort of does, until you get any big reveals. In this movie, Rian Johnson, in directing and writing the screenplay for this, I believe, decides halfway through the movie, or slightly less than halfway through the movie, to actually play one of his cards and show you a pivotal scene to make you, as the audience member, go, oh, well, that's how the murder happened, and it's clearly this person because of what we've seen. At which point the movie does take a narrative turn where we concurrently, and to some comic effect actually, we see the detective, we see Benoit Blanc wandering around the house looking for clues whilst watching the chief suspect at the same time. They're trying to comically cover their tracks at what's been discovered. So that in itself, depending on whether you're the sort of person to go along with the ride for the mystery, let the movie tell you what's going on. If you're someone like me who likes to second guess everything, frustrating yourself and maybe having your enjoyment of the movie clouded by going, well, it can't be that simple as that. What's this person doing, and what's their motivation? And another thing with the screenplay and editing, with the initial interrogation scene with Benoit Blanc with the different family members, we comically juxtapose what they say they did that night versus what was actually happening, how they really felt. That's another Agatha Christie cliche theme that gets turned on its head here, is that usually with this sort of thing, from what I understand from something like Murder on the Orient Express, is that the victim is usually an arsehole. They're a villain, they're a criminal, they're bad, we'd find out they did reprehensible bad things to the suspects, which is why the suspects felt the need to go over the edge. It's inverted here because good old Christopher Plummer, just solid grandfatherly performance. He's a sweet, kind-natured grandfather, as we find out in the flashback birthday scenes, is that he's saying to each and every member that night, I feel I've been holding you back, it's my fault, so what I have to tell you with the inheritance, you're going to get nothing from me, you're not going to get any inheritance from me, and I think that is the best thing for you, son. Good day. What, you're taking away my money? That's my money, that's my job, that's my birthright, you can't do this, I need that money. I said good day. That's quite, so very very playful and postmodern. There is a class conscious subplot going on. In immediate comparison to Last Christmas, which I just reviewed, with its feeling the need to shove Brexit in your face a couple of times, I felt that this was more subtly played, at least in dialogue terms. It didn't feel the need to spell out what they're talking about exactly. There's one scene that particularly springs to mind is the family are having a conversation, which Anna de Armas's martyr maid character, who is a real standout in this movie, between this and Yesterday and Blade Runner 2049, and the fact she's going to be the next James Bond girl. I'm seeing great things in this actress, and this movie was no exception to that. She walks into this family conversation where Don Johnson's character is saying, I didn't vote for him, but I understand where he's coming from, that you don't come to this country unless you make a worthwhile contribution to our society. I mean, take Marta here. No, Marta, you can join our conversation. Don't feel embarrassed. Since you came here and looked after our grandfather, you've been a part of this family. You've made a sizable contribution. You've done your job for America, haven't you? Having come all the way from Colombia, no, Argentina. Where is she from again? So there's stuff like that with the way that everything's written. So with that, I definitely had a very infectious feeling that all the members of the cast, some of them, like Jamie Lee Curtis and other family members, do get more marginalised and spend less screen time the more the prime suspect is revealed and we focus on them more. But aside from that, everyone concerned is clearly having a great time with this film. I wanted to, with particular attention to Chris Evans, who's clearly relishing the chance, having spent nearly a decade playing the wholesome Captain America, to play a foul-mouthed, bad-tempered, bad behaviour grandson who's going around yelling "eat shit" to everyone. And also Daniel Craig, who's clearly, like Logan Lucky, relishing the chance to prove to the world that he's not just James Bond by putting on a southern accent. And I am merely an impartial but passionate observer of the truth. And going round, like one character says, like Foghorn Leghorn, and I totally saw him as a Foghorn Leghorn going, I say, boy, what were you doing last night at the party? So ultimately, Knives Out, a really fun, playful and well-crafted romp, and with the direction and the script coming up trumps with this postmodern take on the whodunit template, I would definitely say that it's a comfortable buy it. And I hear that it has been confirmed that Rian Johnson wants to work on a Knives Out sequel to this, and judging on the box office reception, we may very well get one. So we weren't expecting much from Rian Johnson after the furore after The Last Jedi, but once again he subverts expectations. Yay. Next up, we go into the unknown. Into the unknown. Into the unknown. With the latest Disney animated movie, Frozen 2. As you could probably decipher from that number, this is the long-awaited awaited sequel to that movie your children made you watch 1,008,784 times. Directed, once again, I believe, by Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee. The premise here, well, we've after the last movie, Elsa and Anna are living happily ever after with Kristoff and Olaf and Sven. Elsa has grown to be physically comfortable with her ice snow controlling powers. Anna and Kristoff have got a thing going on, and Olaf is there, I suppose. But we need a movie to happen, so one night a mysterious voice calls out to Elsa in a way that your children will repeat and get tiresome very quickly, but it appears the voice is calling from a land across the north, and so it's time for a quest with Elsa and her merry band up to the northern lands that their grandfather visited once, and from there maybe we'll find out about elsewhere the origin of where Elsa's powers came from, what happened to Anna and Elsa's parents really, maybe, and maybe Olaf will do something funny. Right off, I'd say perhaps more so than the original movie, this is a musical. And by that, I definitely got a sense during the first half of the movie, at least, that the story would, such as there is, which I'll get to shortly, but the story would stop cold every, no pun intended, I'm sorry about that, would stop cold every 10 minutes so that you could hear a musical cue and the character will say, you know, I feel something, and as a cynical adult you're sat there going, oh no, a song is about to start, isn't it? And then 10 minutes later, another one, we just got over the last one. And yes, one or two of these songs are trying desperately to be the new Let It Go, which, fair enough. Then you heard me imitate one at the beginning of this review. Will they be as popular and ear-catching as Let It Go? Only time will tell. But no, I don't think so. Yep, Frozen 2, people have been waiting for this for a long time, even though we did get a Frozen short at the beginning of the Cinderella remake, just so that we could get children to go and see that Cinderella remake. We got Olaf's Frozen Adventure, which was supposed to be a TV special, but someone at Disney had the bright idea to stick it in front of Coco, at least in America. We never got it here in the UK. But as, oh no, Coco's a little too Mexican, let's put something white, ironically, at the front of that movie, and people didn't take well to that, so some of the charm may have gone out of it, but is Frozen 2 what people were hoping for? I'd say I got very similar feelings to this time last year I saw Wreck-It Ralph 2. It is a well-crafted and beautiful looking, enjoyable, entertaining modern Disney animated movie, but it doesn't really capture lightning in a bottle twice. At least it does change tack from the last movie in the sense that it's not about an isolated Snow Queen and a surprise villain. It's more of a, as I say, it's ultimately the loose story structure is about a quest into the mystical lands, and ultimately finding 4 elemental spirits, a sort of template that would make early Final Fantasy games proud, but it's a very loose structure in which to hang around character development in the loosest sense of the word, and themes in place of actual antagonists. Uh, I'll mention that first. To not, I keep saying this throughout this episode, and I apologise. I don't want to spoil anything, but to say right off the bat, there is no villainous figure to speak of in Frozen 2. The ultimate threat, without spelling it out, does boil down to this is happening because we tampered with the forces of nature. Maybe that was a bad idea. Yeah. Characters, Elsa and Anna are as charming and fun and enjoyable and empowering to watch. It's all about their sisterly bond, and are convinced by their strong sisterly need to protect each other, and that's kind of where the thrust of the story is focused upon, at the expense of its supporting characters. Olaf is there, just the talking snowman. He was tolerable enough in Frozen. He's starting to grate as comic relief here. He does do that trope of they're going on a long journey on a carriage, so he has to blather and talk incessantly about useless information. And but one thing that he does do that kind of works is recapping to strangers the story of the first Frozen, which would make any comical YouTuber like myself proud. Also, there's a tender, heartbreaking moment in the third act that is so reminiscent of what happened to a character in Avengers Infinity War, with very similar dialogue, that made me think Disney has to know about this. This can't be a coincidence. But the character I felt particularly sorry for is Kristoff, Anna's boyfriend. You get a real feeling that the directors and the script writers, when he's there, he's ended up here as a result of the first movie. We can't shunt him off screen or say he disappeared, but we need to do something with him, even though we want to talk about sisterhood and empowerment and embracing your destiny and embracing your true identity of who you are with Elsa. But we have to give Kristoff something to do. We can give him a subplot that is familiar from every crummy sitcom on the planet. The fudged marriage proposal. He's got a ring. He's preparing to pop the question to Anna, but he can't quite work out the right time when to say it. And when he does try to say something, it's misinterpreted. Like, Anna, we're in danger here. We might not have a lot of time left, and I feel we should say about how we feel about each other. What? You think we're in danger? You think we're going to get killed? Oh no, Elsa might be in trouble. Where is she? Elsa? No, that's not what I meant. You get all that, and then about halfway through the movie, just as he's figured out the right way to pop the marriage proposal, set this little scenario up, and he goes back to the village and the little camp and says, oh, where's Elsa and Anna? Oh, they woke up before you. They've already gone to find the next clue or water spirit without you. They didn't leave any directions, so you're stuck here. And yeah, it does immediately lead to a spoof 80s rock ballad song that was actually quite an accurate pastiche, I thought, and is quite funny. But he disappears for a good chunk of the movie after that, because our focus now is on where Elsa and Anna have gone. So that's about it for Kristoff until the climax at the end, where he pops up suddenly, and he does say, you don't need to explain, tell me what I need to do to help you, which is helpful and a welcome surprise and a good indication of the modern male character. A positive trope of the male character in such films that was welcome, but He also seems to have gotten over his anxiety that has been plaguing him throughout the first half of the movie off screen. So that's Christoph for you, and that kind of shows where our focus is on. And like Elsa looking sad and gasping privately to herself. So she's looking sad and gasping and looking sorrowful and staring into the distance. So you should feel empathy at this point. Aside from that, what I've said, Frozen 2 ultimately doesn't capture lightning in the bottle, but the animation is suitably gorgeous. There's a bit with freezing a tide and Elsa learning to tame a water horse spirit that will probably stick in people's heads for some time afterwards. The forest with its colours and sprites and autumnal colour schemes was captivating enough as our main setting, and at one point you do go, wow, look at the huge stone giant guardians of the forest. I don't particularly know why they're here, but that's eye-catching. Yeah, to repeat myself, Frozen 2 is a solid enough entertaining modern Disney animation, nothing more, nothing less, and you should at least watch it. Will there be a Frozen 3 after this? Don't want to spoil it, but certain characters are literally and metaphorically in different places to where they are at the start. So there's certainly the scope or the setup to come up with a plot, but I really don't think that Disney should be pushing their luck here. But you know what? It almost doesn't really matter what I say. I'm sure you've decided that for yourselves. It's Disney. It's Frozen. You're going to see it regardless because it's a Disney brand and you're sure to be entertained by it, and it's something that you recognise. Speaking of which, so here we are, the last movie I saw in 2019. What started with Holmes and Watson has ended with Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, directed by J.J. Abrams. So at the end of The Last Jedi, if there were barely any Resistance members left, enough to fit on the Millennium Falcon, Rey was learning to fully exploit her Jedi powers despite the unhelpful and crass and grumpy Jedi Master Luke Skywalker. Kylo Ren was taking over as the leader of the First Order. No, you know what? Forget all that, because J.J. Abrams has decided to forget all that and tweak things and start over with a new premise right from the beginning of this movie. Snoke may be dead, but the Emperor Palpatine is alive and back from the dead somehow. He's guiding Kylo Ren, but he's essentially taking over the running of things and has brought up this whole fleet of ships from the ground of his hiding place, this called the Final Order, a fleet of Star Destroyers with Death Star cannons, because we can just do that now. So obviously the hunt and race is on to fight for the Resistance to locate the planet Exegol where Emperor Palpatine is hiding. But how will they find it? Will Rey find out her destiny and her heritage, even though she was told that her parents were nobodies at the end of the last movie? Can Kylo Ren be tempted back from the path of darkness? Will Poe Dameron and Finn be given something useful to do as supporting characters finally? Will the galaxy be saved? Will we see Princess Leia in this movie, even though Carrie Fisher has passed on sadly since the last movie? And more to the point, can any of us at this point well and truly give a flying fudge? I remember 2015 when The Force Awakens came out at around this time. We were all excited that Disney had purchased Star Wars after the mismanagement that we felt that George Lucas had done to the Star Wars franchise after so many years, with the prequels in particular. We felt Disney will know what to do. Force Awakens looks like the Star Wars we all knew and loved that seemingly disappeared after 1983. I went to the cinema then, and I was lucky to get a ticket because there were families and children dressed up in Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia costumes. And I went to The Rise of Skywalker in 2019 at my local cinema. We were all optimistic back then. We thought that there was a clear journey. We thought that Disney got the essence of Star Wars and that they had a plan. How times have changed. This is a very messy story, or a messy opening. I mean, right from the start, we barely have time to grasp what is going on. The opening scene is boom! There's Emperor Palpatine. There's Ian McDiarmid back going, "You must embrace your destiny. The time has come, my apprentice," and all that. So it's good to hear that. It's a very convoluted, rushed catch-up within the first 10-15 minutes. Everything feels like a quick transition of characters going, this is what's going on. We have to go to this planet. Okay, now we've got the thing, but we've been given information about somebody might know where to go on this planet. I've got an idea, but we have to go over there to do this. Click, 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 click. You get a real sense that J.J. Abrams may not publicly admit it, but he disapproved of where Rian Johnson took The Last Jedi. I don't know if I've said on camera before, but I've said before that if The Force Awakens was playing in a sand pit with toy figures creating a new story, then The Last Jedi was very much somebody else coming in the sandpit to take over the story and going, and then the spaceship crashed and everybody died and those characters aren't important anymore and this character isn't who you think they are. Oh, and I'm just going to kill off the villain suddenly because you weren't expecting that. And then leaving whoever had to do episode 9 the unenviable course of follow that. So you feel this is damage control. This is J.J. Abrams has been given, you've had one movie of setup with The Force Awakens, and you had a whole other movie of setup with The Last Jedi, and now you've got this movie that has to explain and wrap up everything that you've barely established, and it shows. To try and say something positive here before I get too much into whining about this. It's a Star Wars movie, so you've got jaw-dropping spectacle and set pieces. You've got the John Williams score. I suppose that's the one thing we can take away from this. John Williams as the composer doing all 9 central Star Wars movies, making it feel thematically coherent in a way that the movies in themselves, in other aspects, never quite achieved. Also, Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia pops up for a few scenes to give Rey pep talks and advice before quietly shuffling off, literally. They were. I've heard that they were taken from deleted scenes and dialogue that didn't end up in The Force Awakens, and a couple of obvious moments where her back is to the camera, so it's obviously a different actress, and they digitally painted her face on, and they cut away for the dialogue to go on. Very basic. Essentially, they did the best possible job they could with General Leia under the circumstances, and her send-off was came a little out of nowhere, but at least it served a function in the story that I won't get into. But well done there. Otherwise, other characters. Well, Finn and Poe Dameron are there, but Finn's whole purpose for existing as a stormtrooper that went rogue is kind of undermined by another character that pops up. Poe Dameron has a relationship with another character who pops up out of nowhere, and they say a couple of lines, but you don't get enough time to know who they are exactly, and you think, oh, that's going to be addressed in some spin-off comic or Star Wars book, isn't it? Oh, and it's a strong independent female lady as well, because this sequel trilogy hasn't had enough of those. Rey is so overpowered in this movie. I feel if she's going to be brought up in the same circles as Luke Skywalker in the future, it's going to be film professors taking this character and saying to prospective students, Rey, this is how you this is the definition of a Mary Sue character who's perfect, comes out of nowhere and instantly knows what to do and can instantly solve anything. Yes, she's a Jedi, and by this point she's exhibiting powers that have never appeared in Star Wars before. I'm a Doctor Who fan more than a Star Wars fan, but even I have noticed throughout various media and stories that the Force has certain limitations on what can actually be achieved. I remember when I went to see Attack of the Clones with my mum, and at one point, the point where Anakin finds his long lost mother and the mother promptly dies. Ooh, sad moment. And my mum went, oh no, can't he bring her back to life? And I remember saying at the time, years before Harrison Ford said it in The Force Awakens, that's not how the Force works. Well, all evidence to the contrary in this movie. I mean, physically and powerful. It reaches a point where you don't feel any dread or tension or sense of danger for the characters, or for Rey especially, because she can do anything at this point. To the extent, how are you doing this? Where did you learn to do this? Why should I care what happens to you if you can do this? With this movie, I don't want to go down too hard on J.J. Abrams, because I recognise the unenviable task that he had ahead of him. I mean, months before this came out, I thought, this isn't going to be 100% perfect like Disney wants it to be. You've got to follow on from The Last Jedi, which fans didn't react very well to, which broke the franchise for them. You've got to find a way of wrapping up Princess Leia, even though Carrie Fisher is sadly no longer with us. You have to wrap up the sequel trilogy, and supposedly, according to the marketing, you have to wrap up the whole 9-chapter, 40-year-long Star Wars saga with this single movie. So whilst I'm being negative with this movie, I do appreciate the task that J.J. Abrams had and what he was able to come up with under the circumstances, even if that product is rudimentary, really. Yes, you've got planets, you've got a galaxy far, far away, you've got space battles, you've got villains and heroes, but we've reached a point in cinema, sadly, with action blockbuster sci-fi cinema in particular, where this feels like a Tuesday. You've got Guardians of the Galaxy, you've got other things coming out to the point where Star Wars no longer feels unique, and that is tragic. As remembering as a child when Star Wars was a unique, timeless tale, and here we are, shoving present day politics into it. Going through a story that did my biggest impression going away at the end of this trilogy. A similar sense of ennui and disappointment, frankly, that I had coming out of the Hobbit prequel trilogy, going, oh well, I've spent years following this trilogy and I suppose that's it now. I didn't feel anything like I did with The Lord of the Rings, or I'll even say the Hunger Games trilogy, Mockingjay Part 2. I felt a proper sense of narrative and character closure with Mockingjay Part 2. Here, yes, I suppose I can say the day is saved and everyone's won, but they feel like they're acting out a script, and then Ray delivers a line that God knows how the final line of the film, how fans are going to react to that. Yeah, so that, and J.J. Abrams actively contradicting one or two things that happened in The Last Jedi. Not sure whether to congratulate him for that or say, no, you've made this even more convoluted. I'm not going to give the prequels more credit like other people are doing. I still remember the sense of disappointment watching those and feeling, and even then feeling like, oh no, is this what sci-fi movies are going to be like from now on, just a mess of CGI special effects. But with that trilogy, and with the original trilogy especially, but even with the prequel trilogy, you had a plan, you had a beginning, you had an end, and a clear path getting there. The one thing I'm going to take away from this Star Wars sequel trilogy is that you, Disney, you, Lucasfilm, did not have a roadmap with this. You just went in hoping for the best with different directors, passing on the story, hoping that they were all on the same wavelength when they weren't. I mean, the Emperor Palpatine coming back. Oh, Snoke was supposed to die in The Last Jedi, and we were going to have Emperor Palpatine always coming back at the end as a surprise. No, no, you weren't. You're not fooling anybody with this. So, if anyone can take anything away from this, have a roadmap, have a plan going forward, work out where the trilogy is supposed to begin and end, and what the middle is supposed to accomplish. Everything I've heard with Kathleen Kennedy saying the Emperor was always supposed to come back, J.J. Abrams saying I didn't, subtly saying there are things about The Last Jedi that I didn't approve of. Certainly Rian Johnson coming out and saying, well, I did what I wanted to and I didn't agree with things in The Force Awakens. And J.J. Abrams saying that Rise of Skywalker was always supposed to be this way. and Colin Trevorrow with the original director for episode 9 coming out with his leaked script called Duel of the Fates, going, not according to this draft script, it wasn't. I do apologise, I'm rambling on about the background for this movie rather than the actual plot and themes and characters of this, but this kind of demonstrates the apathy I feel towards this. That this is, out of all 9 Star Wars movies, this is the one I arguably, maybe Attack of the Clones perhaps more so, but certainly this is up there on the apathy rudimentary scale. And I'm struggling to think of a distinctive moment or character beat in this movie that made me care. And so, yeah, I am going to plump for a forget it with this. So that is 2019 all dealt with now. All 54 movies, I believe. It's been a journey at least. And as for this month, I believe this time last year I felt particularly festive and generous and said I didn't want to do any recommendations, but I do feel a little more objective here, and I will say that Rian Johnson did indeed subvert expectations for me, because Knives Out was a playful and entertaining mystery, and I would, out of everything I saw this month, give it my recommendation of the month. Sure. I really don't want to be mean and Scroogey and bin anything, but I did go into this month expecting it to be Last Christmas from everything that I heard, but no, and I can't believe I'm saying this, a Star Wars movie is at the bottom of the pile for me. I mean, it's a rudimentary, engaging, going through the motions piece of science fiction that will keep your eyes stimulated for 2 hours at least, but that's all I can say about it at this point. But anyway, next video I will be going into wrapping up with my best and worst of 2019 before we move into a hopeful new year and a hopeful new decade, hopefully. But in the meantime, hope you've had a good Christmas. Hope you're looking forward to the new year. Did you see any of these movies? Did you see any other movies? What did you think of them? Do let me know in the comments section. In the meantime, I hope you'll join me next time for At the Movies with Andrew to wrap up 2019. In the meantime, do like, comment and subscribe, and stay tuned to Matt's Movies, Music and More with myself and my friend Matt. In the meantime, have yourselves a merry little Christmas and take care of yourselves and each other. Peace out.